I'm really delighted to have Jessica Beardsley with us today. She is a registered dietitian and owner of Jessica Beardsley Nutrition. She works with adult women and athletes to help them build sustainable eating habits and support energy, performance, and long-term health. Her work focuses on evidence-based nutrition counseling and helping people navigate body changes and improve their relationship with food without restrictive dieting. I can't tell you how much this comes up in my work in the menopause space. I see patients individually for therapy, and I think this comes up with almost all of my patients that they're attempting to manage the weight change and body changes of this time through restrictive eating because many of us were not taught about good nutrition. And and that has a really big effect on mood in addition to a lot of other things. But so when people are having a lot of irritability, one of the first things I ask them is like, what's their pattern of eating like? Because that's one low-hanging fruit. It feels like that we can get restrictive eating off the table and mood sort of almost automatically improves. So, welcome, Jessica. I will turn it over to you now, and I'll be here to help moderate.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal. I'm really excited to be here today. And this is a very important topic. Menopause in general is something that we don't talk about enough. And so I'm really glad that there is a forum where you all can come and learn about all the different things. And so today we're going to talk about nutrition. And I'm going to share my screen. All right. So this is going to be a brief topic. You'll probably notice that I don't go a ton into detail about a lot of things. I could have made this 3 hours, and we're not going to do that today. So we want to have time for questions. My name is Jessica Beardsley. I am in Chapel Hill. I have an office off Legion Road. So if you're local, I'm around, and I do work with I do work with men and women. I do work with a lot of athletes, but I do work with folks who are not athletic or don't feel that they call themselves an athlete, but are just still working through trying to let go of the dieting mentality and improve their relationship with food and movement and their bodies. All right. So, why does this talk exist? Many reasons, but many women going through menopause notice their weight is changing, their body composition is changing, their labs shift. So blood sugar goes up, cholesterol goes up. They might notice energy fluctuations, and maybe they've been noticing that for a while, but part of it does um, change with menopause and during that transition. We'll talk a little bit about why. And then there's a lot of confusing nutrition information online. I think a lot of folks go to online sources because it's right there and it's easy and it may be quicker than trying to make an appointment with your doctor. So there's a lot of confusing things out there, and people have tried. Well, I won't go too into it now. Okay. So what we're going to cover today is what changes the body, is what's happening. I won't go into all of the medical things, but I'll do some highlights. And then how those changes affect metabolism, muscle, and bone, and how nutrition can really help support your health long term, as well as energy. And then also, specifically, if you never heard of a dietitian, how dietitians can help. Okay. So I'm just going to jump into this. If you've been to the other hormone talk, menopause talks, then you probably kind of have a gist of this. But I'm going to talk about it in case this is new to you. So estrogen will, generally speaking, for women will increase with puberty and during the adult life stage, pre-pregnancy and around pregnancy. You kind of see what it does here, where it kind of stays within this range. It changes during pregnancy. It goes back to kind of that middle ground, and then in the menopause transition, it goes down quite drastically. And so estrogen, as because it goes down, that leads to all these changes. So estrogen is key in bone remodeling. It's key in muscle maintenance. It's key in where fat is distributed and where it is on the body. It's also key in how insulin is how it's sensitive your body is to insulin. Therefore, people see blood sugar go up when they haven't changed anything else. It's also active in ghrelin and leptin, which are appetite hormones. It also influences heart health because it has a role in how flexible your blood vessels are. So estrogen itself does so many things for the body. So when it goes down, people notice these changes and they're like, "What's going on?" So this is why. So that we kind of just wanted to see during the menopause transition, estrogen declines, and it affects a lot of different things in the body. Okay, I do want to talk about bone health. It's something that's near and dear because I think a lot of folks don't consider bone health until they break a bone when they're older. And then they find that when you break a bone, you don't move. Like you have to let it heal. And that really changes mobility and also affects brain, it affects anxiety and depression as well. So just so that you know, estrogen has a huge role in protecting bone. So as estrogen goes down, bone breakdown actually increases and bone buildup decreases. It's a little bit harder. And so generally this happens as we age, for everyone. But if we are going through menopause, you'll notice right around here this drastic dip, a decline. This happens due to the estrogen drop. We can, and I'll talk about what we can do to support our bones as much as possible because we want to keep them as dense as we can and maintain as much of that as we can. We basically have maxed out. I don't know how old everyone is on here, but if you're past 30, you kind of maxed out on where it as high as it can be. And at this point, we're just trying to maintain as much as we can. Um, Bone and muscle highly connected. So muscle, the other thing that happens as we age and also specifically with menopause is that we lose muscle mass. The ability to build up and maintain muscle mass takes a little bit more intention. Just simply with aging, we lose muscle mass. So adults lose about 3 to 8% per decade after age 30, in general. And then with menopause, that can speed that up. So for folks who have a period, and then they're really noticing a big change. So why does this matter? Well, I'll talk about this in a little bit. Muscle mass is your main driver of metabolism, of your basal metabolic rate. So what your body needs to form and function, a lot of that is driven by how much muscle mass you have. The other part that really matters is when we are losing muscle, we're losing strength and stability and mobility. And so we are not able to physically move as much if we're not as strong. So this also affects balance. And so there's like fine motor muscles in all sorts of areas, but like in the legs, if you're thinking about balance, and so keeping those up as best as we can is going to be helpful, but keeping the large muscles really strong is really helpful for metabolism overall. Um, and blood sugar regulation. So an active working muscle can take up blood glucose in the bloodstream without necessarily insulin. So even if your body is getting more insulin insensitive, having more muscle mass can really help regulate that blood sugar because your body is going to be able to utilize the glucose and pull it out of the bloodstream. So it's not just circulating and causing damage. We want that blood sugar to come into the muscles to work and be used. And so um, we definitely want to pay attention to this. Okay. All right. So I mentioned this briefly. Metabolism doesn't just shut down with menopause, but what it kind of feels like it does because the basal metabolic rate is highly influenced by muscle mass, like I just said. And that's basal metabolic rate is how much your body is burning calorie wise at rest. So, what does it need for your heart to pump, your lungs to breathe, your brain to function? Not necessarily to move around very much, but to like just basic functions. And it takes a lot of energy to maintain your muscle mass. And so there's multiple things going on there. But a bigger influence on metabolic rate is your age, your sex, and your genetics. So there is a huge genetic component. So we can't put everyone across the board and say like you all need the same amount of energy, calories, etc. It's different for everyone. Also, basal metabolic rate goes down if we have a history of dieting. So whenever we've gone through periods of restriction, the body will adapt to that. And oftentimes it does not go back up to what it was before. It will stay blunted. So weight gain in menopause is mainly due to muscle loss. And a lot of that is related to the estrogen dropping, as well as just lifestyle changes. Sometimes we get to a certain point where our jobs are more sedentary. Um, our kids are out of the house, just depending on what the lifestyle is, we might just not be moving as much. We also might not be sleeping as well, right? And sleep has a big influence on energy levels, which then also leads into how much we're moving and how much muscle mass we have. So like both, all of those things are compounding. And at the same time, hunger hormones, as with estrogen dropping and with sleep disruption, you have a leptin does not function quite as well, and ghrelin can be a little overactive. So, and leptin is your fullness hormone, ghrelin is your hunger hormone, and so those things can go a little bit out of whack. So these are all things that contribute to what we notice, and oftentimes when folks notice their body getting bigger, and some it's more subtle, some it's a bigger change, and a lot. Let's just say it can be really it can be really disruptive and feel very odd. So let's acknowledge that, especially if everything's been felt like it's nothing. I've done all the same things and things are changing. So the fat redistribution, I do want to talk about that because a lot of folks are like, I'm getting larger around the midsection. Okay. Um, a lot of people notice more belly fat, or their waist they're not able to wear their pants anymore. Certain things that they've been able to wear for a long time and they can't fit in their clothes. That's hard to deal with. So like it's real. And the one of the main reasons for that is that with estrogen declining, okay, so let me just back up. Estrogen promotes fat storage in the butt and the thighs and the boobs. And so these areas tend to, when estrogen goes down, those places aren't going to be getting as much fat, and fat storage actually more shifts toward the midsection. So instead of being subcutaneous, which means below the skin, like fat that you can pinch, it's more visceral fat, is less estrogen tends to lead to more visceral fat storage, which is around your organs. So this is, your heart, your kidneys, your liver. People notice that they might develop fatty liver. They might have more fat around. Um, well, you wouldn't necessarily know this until you looked at labs or maybe a DEXA or something like that, where you could actually see this. But fat storage goes from subcutaneous towards visceral fat. So from the butt and thighs towards the abdomen. So that's a big shift. Like my body shape is changing, right? So people go towards from like the pear shape to the apple shape. Um, and so a big part of this is estrogen decreasing. Okay. So one of the components of that is also muscle loss. So we're going back to the muscle thing again. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But some of the health impacts, and you might have heard this from your doctor or from various other talks here, folks in the menopause transition and postmenopausal, their cardiovascular risk goes way up. And it seems like it feels like it's dominated by men for a long time, but like once we get through menopause, our risk matches. It's the same. So it's pretty high. Women die of cardiovascular disease. And I don't think it's talked about enough. So cardiovascular risk, think what's your blood pressure, how's your cholesterol doing, that sort of thing. And because estrogen affects cholesterol and blood pressure, when both those things go up, when estrogen goes down, that's where we see the cardiovascular risk. And also, once again, I'll just repeat myself, estrogen affects how well our body is sensitive to the insulin that we're producing. And so when our insulin sensitivity goes down, we're not absorbing the blood glucose into the cells anymore. And so, and it ends up looking like insulin resistance. And that with blood sugar going up, there you have more of a risk for diabetes. Um, okay, I won't move into that. Okay, so we're going, oh my gosh, what's happening? What do I do? And the internet and all the people in the world are saying, okay, cut carbs, eat less, go on a diet, da 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 da. So this can be, right? We hear all the things like try take this supplement, increase your protein to this massive amounts, don't eat carbohydrates, stop eating this, eat more of that. It can be very dysregulating. It can be very overwhelming. Um, and then it oftentimes if people are taking steps like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, extreme dieting or these massive shifts can work against all your biological changes and actually backfire. So restrictive dieting does backfire. What happens when we are reducing either overall calories, overall carbohydrates, we go on any of these restrictive dieting, um, there's a lot out there. I'm not naming a whole lot. I'm just saying, in general, restrictive dieting, when we're cutting a lot of the food that we're eating and thus to lose weight, what happens is we lose a whole lot of muscle. We lose 20 to 30% of muscle in a weight loss diet. And with that, bone is lost too. So if we are not getting enough nutrition overall, we can't maintain our bones. And if we're losing muscle mass, the main source of building up muscle is strength training. And if we are losing muscle mass, we can't build up our bones. So we lose bone mass, we lose muscle mass. Um, and just FYI, when weight comes back, it comes back as fat. We don't necessarily build up that bone again post a diet. Okay. So this can permanently lower bone mass. Um, and so it's like, so take a breath before you go straight to a diet. Another big thing that people notice when they are on a restrictive diet, if you've ever been on one, your energy level crashes. You can't think very well. It's hard to do because you're trying to focus on other things, but your brain keeps going towards food. And we just generally don't have a lot of energy when we're not eating enough. And then there's a overwhelming chaotic feeling of like increased cravings. I'm really going towards the XYZ, whatever it is that we've been restricting. Maybe it's carbohydrates, for example. When we are restricting carbohydrates, we're going to crave them because our body needs them. Also, whenever even a mental restriction of a thought about restricting and like saying, this is the last time I'm ever having cake, for example, then man, cake's starting to look real good. So this is also a mental feedback. Um, so increased cravings happen biologically and mentally and psychologically. And so the last thing on here is the last bullet on here. I want to stress this is that yo-yo dieting or like a constant weight fluctuation from diets is a big predictor, the biggest probably predictor of weight gain long term. So, and that happens for various reasons going on looking at this. But also it happens because our basal metabolic rate can decrease. And the body is really good at adapting to what we're doing and what we're giving it. So if we are giving it less, it's going to adapt by slowing down. So metabolic rate will slow down if we're just constantly not giving it enough. But when we start giving it enough, the metabolic rate's still going to stay blunted. And that is like our bodies are really great at adapting and we want to survive. So one of the things that we're doing is surviving. So I can survive the next famine, even though it's a diet, not a famine. My body thinks it's a famine. And so this leads to more weight gain when we go down and we go up again. So if you've ever seen weight loss graphs, they always go back up again. You could cut them off and look just goes down, but it goes back up. So we have that dieting history that is a bigger predictor of weight gain. So what we don't want to do, the reason why I put a pendulum on here is that if I'm take that ball and pull it back, it's like I'm restricting to here, right? I can't, it's hard to do. So I can't keep this restriction up for very long. I try and I try. Maybe it's easy the first few days, and then it gets harder and harder. And eventually, I it we let it go, and it swings back to the other side. So if you think about this side as restriction, the other side would be full on binge. Would be like I'm just going to go all in. There's also that psychological element of like, F it, I'm just gonna whatever. I couldn't keep this, therefore I'm just gonna go to this. And then that doesn't feel good. And then we go swing right back over to this where we're restricting again. And so this pendulum is really chaotic on the body, on the right, the mind and the body. And so let's stop swinging on the pendulum and get it down to where it's just hanging out here, where it can be a little bit more at ease, better for the mind and the body. Okay. So, well, what do I do, Jessica? Why are you keep talking about this? What do I do? So, essentially, I know this is not just around nutrition because I can't help myself. I talk about all the other things. Um, we want a balanced eating pattern. And this is where, if you're like, what did that actually look like? I'm going to talk a little bit about what that might look like, but I highly recommend seeing a dietitian so that they can talk specifically to what you need because you are different than the next person and you're going to need slightly different depending on what you do in your life. So regular eating. For a lot of my clients, it's eat within an hour of waking up and then eat about every 3 hours. It does end up looking like 3 meals and a few snacks throughout the day, depending on what your day looks like. This is really hard for nurses, doctors, and teachers. And so we have to figure out ways to really nourish our bodies throughout the day. So depending on what you do and what your life looks like, this is where once again dietitian can help. Um, we always want to include a carbohydrate when we eat something. So I'll talk about carbohydrates a little bit more next slide. But because of complex carbohydrates are going to be a little bit better for blood sugar control, which is why I say complex. And just to give you like an idea of what complex means, if we take an apple, a whole apple, right? Holding, I should have brought an apple. If you have a whole apple and you eat it, you're getting that's a complex carbohydrate. Okay. If you mush it up, you can make applesauce. Okay, so that's a bit more processed. If you take the apple and completely make it to apple juice, okay, that's highly processed. That would be a simple carbohydrate, right? It's liquid, mainly it's liquid and fruit sugars. When we drink it, it goes into the bloodstream and raises our blood sugar pretty quick, which sometimes we need. So there's a simple carbohydrate, then there's applesauce, which is somewhere in the middle, then there's a whole apple, which is a complex carb. So you could think of it as the amount of processing, but there's also the fiber component. So a whole apple has more fiber than apple juice, right? Has zero. Um, so complex carbohydrates, great for blood sugar, also great for energy. Your brain functions off of glucose, and it requires a lot. So when we are able to eat carbohydrates on the regular, that is good for our brain and our body. Think fruits, vegetables, grains. I'm going to get on to the next slide. Sorry, just move on. But we do want we want carbohydrates, we want protein, we want fat. Those are the macronutrients. If you've ever heard of macros, that's what we're talking about out there. And we need all of them. And we don't need any single one of them in excess. And what does that mean, Jessica? What do you mean by excess? Well, talk to your dietitian because this is more specific to each person. Physical activity and training. So that's another part. So we want to eat, we want to move our body, and let's not forget sleeping. So we can eat and move our body great, but if we're not sleeping very well, that's gonna be a pillar that's like lost, and our body can't actually recover from doing what it does and adapt to doing like the physical activity. We're not gonna be able to get stronger if we're not sleeping very well. Same thing as if we're doing all the physical activity and we're sleeping great, but we're not eating very well, we're not going to be able to get stronger either. So there's all the things work together. Um, the other parts of just basic healthy living is not smoking and alcohol in moderation. So I won't go too much more into those, but those are just like, these are keys to healthy living. Okay. So why regular meals matter? I've already talked about some of this. So 5 to 6 meals or snacks per day, eating about every 3 hours. What that does is it helps your blood sugar. I don't know if you ever looked at blood sugar graphs. If you think about something very simple, we eat, blood sugar goes up, and then it comes back down. We eat again, and it goes back up and it goes back down. So we're eating regularly so the blood sugar can go up. And what we don't really love to see, because this is harder on the body, is a spike and a big drop, or I'm going to eat and then I'm not going to eat for a long time. And so, sorry, I use my fingers a lot, and some of you can't see me. um, what we don't want to see is spikes and drops. And what's helpful is eating regularly, because that helps you give consistent energy, which also means we're a little bit less jittery, we're a little bit less anxious, we're not as hangry. So think about brain function. I put that as number one in this bullet, because I feel like that is, if for nothing else, let's keep our brains healthy and fueled. We will also just have energy stability. People notice a lull at certain points. And I'm like, well, when was the last time you ate? We kind of look at that and we're like, oh, there's a lull that we haven't eaten for 4 hours. What does that look like? Um, when we eat regularly, we have less anxiety. We, amongst my, I work with some other just dietitians who work with eating disorders, and we say a starving brain is an anxious brain. And so, thinking about that, one being like, I like Crystal, what you said, or like, when's the last time you've eaten, right? Um, Also, when we eat regularly, our appetite's not going to be all over the place, right? We're not going to get the cravings. A lot of folks I find who have a bit more of a chaotic eating pattern, and they start eating regularly, they don't have the cravings in the evening anymore. Like those kind of disappear, because we're eating more regularly. We're not just trying to catch up at the end of the day. There is something in you that uh, if we're not getting enough, your body's going to constantly send you signals, and eventually you're going to get what you need, but it's going to be at the end of the day, and it may not be what is best for blood sugar control, etc. So if we eat consistently throughout the day, it's a bit calmer for everyone. The body, the brain, appetite, everything feels more stable. Okay. Um, all
Can
right.
I ask you a quick question there?
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a comment in the or a question in the chat that I think is really relevant to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, intermittent fasting is like all the rage now, and
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of patients telling me that like this is going to be the magic solution to help them
Right.
with their weight and metabolism. But based on what you're saying here, that's like not consistent with intermittent fasting at all. Right. So what are your thoughts on intermittent fasting, especially during this like menopause
Mm-hmm.
transition?
Oh, I feel like intermittent fasting, it looks different for a lot of, like, intermittent fasting has a lot of different definitions. Some people will have, it's like day to day, it's different versus the hours of the day and the period of fasting overnight. Your body is meant to fast overnight. Okay. So we are, in essentially, if we're eating while we're awake throughout the whole day, for a bit of intermittent fasting. No, but when we are not, I don't feel like intermittent fasting is sustainable. So, because of all of the negative effects of what we find when we are not consistently eating. Some folks will delay their eating pattern until a certain time of the day, or they'll cut off their eating, like they'll eat earlier and then they'll cut it. So it depends on what it looks like for the person. But what I also find is when you're intermittent fasting and you're cutting off these time points, it also means that your energy isn't going to be um, if you exercise at certain times a day, but you don't eat during those times a day, that can be really detrimental to your body. Like, we're going to lose more muscle mass than we gain. We're not going to be able to get that um, all of the adaptation that happens from strength training or running or whatever we end up engaging in. So with intermittent fasting, I don't find it to be super helpful. Some folks find it helpful mainly because it is a way to restrict calories. But I also don't see that being a long term for a lot of people, just because the way of our lives are structured. It We typically are doing things most of the day, and so eating most of the day does make sense. There can be. Sorry, I'm going to go. I don't need to go too much more into this. Does that help? Okay.
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you.
All right. Carbohydrates. Carbohydrates break down into glucose. So they're broken down. We chew them up. They break down more in the stomach, goes into our small intestine, breaks down to glucose, goes into our bloodstream, and then our muscles in our brain take it up. And yay, we've got energy. Um, Carbohydrates are really helpful for all of the things. It fuels everything. It fuels your heart. It helps with blood sugar stability. We don't want to take out carbohydrates and assume that our diabetes or our blood sugar is going to get better. Um, so we still need them. And I'm not going to talk specific amounts because I do believe this is where a dietitian comes in hand because you are different from the next person. Okay. But our gut does require carbohydrates. So a lot of folks find that if they're cutting out carbohydrates, they might notice, well, I'm not talking a ton about GI symptoms today, but I do talk about that a lot with my clients. That they might notice a short, like, oh, it helps, I have less bloating. And then it gets a lot worse because we are not feeding the gut bacteria. So gut health is affected. So we want carbohydrates each time that we eat because we want to give ourselves energy. I would lean towards complex carbohydrates because it helps with blood sugar control. It makes sure that you don't get a spike and a drop. So think whole grains. If you want to know whole grains, you can Google this. There's a big list, but just like oats, rice, quinoa, wheat, whole wheat. Beans and lentils have great carbohydrates and fiber. So does fruit, vegetable. Actually, everything I've listed here has fiber because especially if it's in its whole form. If we've taken one of these and really processed it down, it's not going to have as much fiber. So just take that into account. It's not like you have to take it out of your diet completely, but just know that we want to lean in on the complex carbohydrates. And so I say always include a carbohydrate. I've got clients who reach for, what do they reach for? They might reach for nuts as a snack, which is fine. Nuts are wonderful. They don't have a lot of carbohydrates. So you're getting protein, fat, and fiber, but we're not getting carbohydrates. So they're like, well, I'm filling myself on nuts, but I don't actually have a lot of energy. So add a carbohydrate to that. Um, so thinking about balancing out your carbohydrates with a protein or fat, typically that's what I say. Always have a carbohydrate, add a protein or a fat to that for a snack, and then of course have all the things for a meal. Okay, I am seeing the time and I'm going to try to get through the rest of this. um,
You're
I
doing
will,
fine. This is great
okay.
information, so don't feel like you have to rush.
Uh, Fiber is, I could talk a lot about fiber, but I'm not going to. Fiber is so great for so many things. If you're an American living like the majority of Americans, we don't get enough fiber. The average is around 14 grams per day, but really, it's really beneficial and helpful to get 25 grams a day. Could get 30, could get 35, depending on if your body is used to getting fiber at that amount, because we can build up a tolerance for it. And it feeds the good gut bacteria. It also really helps lower cholesterol. Fiber helps blood sugar control. I feel like I've said that so many times. Um, it also, yeah, I said all the things. I don't need to read off this list, but fiber does so many things. Soluble fiber specifically, if we're aim for about 10 grams, it can be challenging. So let's acknowledge that. But that will, in a very real way, lower your LDL and total cholesterol because what it does is in your gut, soluble fiber binds with bile. Bile is made up of a lot of cholesterol, and we excrete it from the body. And then the body goes, oh, okay, I need to make more bile. So it pulls the cholesterol from the blood to make more because that's what we do, and thus lowering cholesterol. So it's a very real way and this can be in conjunction with medications for cholesterol. Okay. Protein. All right. I know everyone's going to be like, how much protein? So protein is really important. It doesn't give us energy, but it's very important to build muscle because it gives us the amino acids. Okay. Um, so what I'm gonna cut through this and get to the bolded areas that I have on my slide. In general, adults are recommended to get zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight in protein. Okay, so if you really want to try to calculate this out, take your body weight in pounds divided by 2.2 and you can get kilograms. Now, there is not a recommended protein for menopause, folks going through menopause or postmenopausal, but we do have evidence that would suggest that getting a little bit more than within like what's for an average adult can be beneficial. So this going from zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram to 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram can be beneficial in maintaining that muscle mass we talked that we lose quite a bit of. Now that's not a huge change. So I think I try to calculate it out for someone who's 150 pounds. We would be like, yeah, get 54 grams, but this is at the zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram gives you about 54, but you would increase it to 68 grams at the 1 gram per kilogram. I hope I'm not really confusing you all. So I don't think of that as a huge increase. I think a moderate increase is helpful. And where we get these numbers, there's a lot of sports nutrition science that shows that certain gram amounts can be really helpful for athletes. And we do typically increase the protein for athletes. So depending on what they're doing, we might increase it up to 1.5 or 2. If you are not an athlete that is bodybuilding, that is high level cycling, running, etc., we don't need that high amount. So, but what we do want to do is combine that 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram protein with strength training, and your body will then adapt and build more muscle. Don't get more than 30 grams in a meal. Okay, our body doesn't really need more. It can't use more than 30 grams in one meal. We really do better when it's stretched out throughout the day. So 20 to 30 grams per meal stretched out throughout the day. Some folks find that hard for breakfast, and I say, that's okay. Get 10 to 15 grams at bread. Do what you can. Doesn't have to be this magical amount. This is once again where a dietitian could really help you like work through your day and figure out how to fit that in. But we can't get it all in one go, is what I'm trying to say. I'll just get 60 grams at dinner time and then it's great. Because our body won't be able to utilize all of that for muscle mass or for muscle protein synthesis. And it will be, our body knows how to convert that to fat. So, okay, I'm going to skip over calcium and go straight to fat. Um, okay, I saw that some questions came in, but I'm not reading them. Do you want me to?
No, we can save them for the end
Okay,
so that you have
okay.
time.
Um, the main thing I want to say about fat is a super high fat diet and a super low fat diet is not helpful. So we do need fat in our diets. It's utilized for so many things. Fat soluble vitamins, for example. But what we do know specifically for heart health is that we're trying to limit saturated fat. And in general, I think it's general recommendations are less than 10%. The American Heart Association recommends less than 6% of your calories from saturated fat. So what does that mean? Don't think I wrote down exact numbers. For someone who is having I don't love calories, but a 2,000 calorie diet would get you to about 13 grams of saturated, you would aim for less than 13 grams of saturated fat in a whole day. And to give you an example, a Starbucks muffin might have like 6 grams of saturated. I can't remember, but you could, all these things you can look up if you feel like you can handle seeing a bunch of numbers. The main thing I do want to emphasize is that unsaturated fats, the ones that are generally liquid at room temperature, are going to be the ones that are super heart healthy, and we do need them. So think nuts, seeds, olive oil, avocado, fatty fish. Watch out for coconut oil. It is highly, highly saturated, so not heart healthy. So lean in towards those unsaturated fats. Move forward. Okay. Movement. And once again, this gets back to why are we doing movement? We're doing movement for a lot of things. It actually helps in everything. Anxiety, depression, heart health, cancer risk, diabetes, blood pressure, brain health, bone health, longevity. If it was a pill, everyone would take it. It's so good for us. The general recommendation is 150 minutes a week. You probably all have heard that. And what that means, moderate activity. Moderate means it raises my heart rate and I can kind of still talk while I'm doing it, versus vigorous activity, which means I'm huffing and puffing and maybe I can't carry on a conversation while I'm doing it. So that's just the variance there. And Strength training, highly recommend to do 2 to 3 days a week. This is really important for folks in menopause and in transition, especially with estrogen dropping. Okay. Um, I don't know if I need to talk about sleep. Let's move on. Okay. How a dietitian can help. Well, even from what I've said, I might have confused some of you. So if you are highly confused, or if you've gotten like, oh, this is interesting to me, but I'm not quite sure, this is where a dietitian can help you get personalized guidance. Also, if you've had a history of chronic dieting, we don't want to get back into that cycle again. If you find a dietitian, they can be really helpful for your specific, what does your day look like? What is your lab? What are your labs, cholesterol, blood sugar, any digestive issues? So they're going to maneuver around all of those things and help guide you in like making a plan together. I would look for someone who has credentials. So a registered dietitian means we've gone through all of the didactic work, we've gone through internships, we've taken a test, etc. I am licensed in North Carolina. I would find someone who is licensed where you're physically located. Doesn't mean, I mean, they could be like in California, but licensed in North Carolina, and you can work with them. Um, I would look for a dietitian who is not pushing something fast or quick or promising all the things. So most nutrition is a little bit more boring, and it's different for everyone. So I can't give the same diet to everyone. It's going to be amazing. That doesn't work. So someone who is pushing quick fixes or selling supplements, just be wary on those, just because there's a kind of conflict of interest here. Okay. I wanted to get that.
That was great. Thank you so much, Jessica. I mean, as always in these sessions, I learned so much. And, I'm an expert in this space with menopause, and there's just so many different angles to it that there's a lot of complexity, right? Because there's like a whole set of recommendations around sleep, a whole set of recommendations around diet, exercise, mental health, heart health, like all these different things. But I think that the messages that we're giving are consistent with one another, right? And so we see that, like what I was talking about at the beginning with nutrition supports mental health, and vice versa as well. And, you know, sleep supports blood sugar regulation, which, so does diet. And so there are multiple sort of points of intervention, but none of us are going to do this perfectly. And that's not the point.
That's right.
That we're always just trying to do things a little bit better so that we can feel a little bit better. All right, so we do have a couple questions in the chat. Just very quickly first, before we get to that, I just wanted to highlight that we do also have specialists and experts who can help you with menopause-related symptoms here at UNC. These are the folks that we collaborate with. And I guess I need to update this slide because there are more folks that we have brought into the fold who are doing this work well now at UNC. So we'll get the updated information sent out to you. But not everybody at UNC specializes in menopause, and I hear that a lot from people in the community who've tried to access care with us. Cecilia, you can go to the next slide,
Oh,
or whoever's
oh, sorry.
presenting.
I will.
Sorry. Thank you. And then this is our midlife women's mood clinic. Um, and we provide specialized consultations. We can make recommendations about medications, but also do behavioral health coaching. So we do talk to people about how to implement the changes that their dietitian recommends, because sometimes it's easier said than done. And so we can
Yep.
think about like how that fits into your life and what small change you can make today that will have big impact down the road.
Mhm.
Um, okay. And then go ahead again. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So we can move ahead into the Q&A portion now.